Coming to you from an undisclosed location somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, waiting out the alien apocalypse. He is armed with a machete and a microphone. This is the Mysterious Outpost.
All right, welcome to Mysterious Outpost Radio. This is Mike Blocker. Tonight on the show, I'm telling you, I'm getting goosebumps already. He is a phenomenal researcher. He has spent 13 years in the Montauk projects. His great uncle was the first president of the Soviet Union, and his grandfather was the first. I have it right here somewhere, but his great grandfather was the great grandfather. Help me out with this, Stewart. Was he the?
Yeah, my great grandfather actually was the one who he had 9 children. And he groomed them all to take over the Soviet Union. My great-uncle Yakov was the first president of the Soviet Union. My grandfather Mikhail was the one they sent to the United Kingdom to start the Communist Party there. And then they sent him to the United States to do the same thing. Yakov's son Andrei started the KGB. He was my cousin. And my uncle Benjamin actually started mind control and programming in the Soviet Union in the 1930s.
That's one hell of a...
And my grandmother was a Soviet spy.
I think I remember you saying that on other interviews, but I'm telling you, you have one hell of a family history, Stewart.
Yeah, now, well, it's not exactly lovely for Americans, but...
Does that put a target on your head, with you?
Yes, of course.
And, because without a doubt, you're going to be, I guess, on the watch list, the government's watch list, just because of your family past. But anyways, before we get into it, Stewart, pre-show, you was talking about a conference or seminar that you have coming up in January, I believe.
Right. And actually, it's a week-long intensive class, which is January 15 to 19 here in Western Michigan. And it will be about information. I will teach everything that I know, all the updated research that I've done in the past year, answering any questions about techniques, deprogramming, hyperspace, language, etc. It's very intense and covers every topic you can imagine, including ancient history, true history. I will be giving a special lecture on the Templar Order. Why? Because at the end of December, we will be on the island of Nevis in the Caribbean until early January for an investiture. I have been knighted by the Sacred Medical Order of the Knights of Hope and also by the Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem. And they are also now starting a new medical order for the Knights Templar based on the original information of the original creation of the Templar Order. And I'll be giving a special lecture on that on the investiture New Year's Eve. So people are invited to that as well. And I'm working with the Prime Minister, Swiss bankers, European businessmen to create an entire new country in the Caribbean outside of the New World Order. Based on alternative healing, true ancient history, and the true way that people on Earth need to be. So it's quite an amazing time period.
Yeah, you seem very busy, and I'm telling you, how do you stay motivated, Stewart, through all this research, through all the seminars, conferences, through just everything that you do? It seems like you are one busy man.
Yes, and that's a big question. As I mentioned earlier about my family history, I think I owe a lot to people of Earth for what especially what my great uncle did.
Yeah.
In the Soviet Union, he was associate of Stalin, and he had executed over 1 million people. So that's something that needs to be and he ordered the execution of the Tsar, which interestingly, just this week in United Kingdom newspapers, there was an article about my great uncle and his role in the execution of the Tsar and the Romanov family. So this is something that we need to compensate for, as well as my 13 years at the Montauk Project, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
This is something that also I feel an obligation to humanity to do something to help with what has been done during that time period and before.
Okay, Stewart, within this next hour with you, we may be jumping all over the place because if anybody familiar with you, you cover pretty much everything. And that's the kind of research that I'm into. I don't leave anything untouched because I say it with every interview and to my audience that with every topic you research, that's one puzzle piece. And eventually it creates a better picture. And so we may be bouncing a little bit here and there, but before we get into it, what was the major, with you spending 13 years in the Montauk Project, what do you think was the major intent for the Montauk and other mind control programs? What was the major agenda in that?
I would say if I had to narrow it down to one specific overall agenda, it was for the fact that there's a relatively small group of a few 100,000 people who need to control 8 billion people. And so when you have that kind of numbers, armies and weapons aren't enough. And so the most logical thing they can do is to mind control and program the population, because as they indoctrinated us at the time, the best slave is one who doesn't know he's a slave.
Exactly.
And so that's what we're seeing now. That's what we're seeing now here and now in the globe. But personally, I was used to go into a language of hyperspace, to go into time travel. They changed the way my brain perceives reality. So they wanted to create a living being who was like a living MRI machine. And that's basically what they did to me. I was physically blind for 29 years, and then I could only see with my mind. And that's what I have learned to deal with.
What percentage of your knowledge and research, if you had to break it down to a percentage, how much percentage towards the Montauk Project has given you enlightenment and expanded your consciousness towards your own personal journey, I guess, for lack of a better term?
That's a very interesting question, because I never associated my time at Montauk with enlightenment. I, in fact, associate the time afterwards.
Yes.
In my deprogramming, in my research, etc. That was the time of enlightenment. I will say, there was a time I was very angry and resentful of the years I spent at Montauk Project. But now, many years later, I realize that if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be doing this work. In fact, I may not even be alive. So in that respect, I have to be grateful for that time I spent there, even though it was difficult.
But you can't knock yourself too much, because still, even with that, you being in the Montauk Project for 13 years, you still had to have that drive, that motivation, that ambition, that fire in your spirit to keep pushing forward, no matter what all the haters, are going to throw in your face, saying that you're a phony, whatever. You have your own journey, and you got to dig deep, and you definitely did that, Stewart.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, that's an ongoing situation, pretty much on a daily basis with the people out there. And it's a bit discouraging to see how humans think and how they are judgmental and how they attack when they know nothing.
Yeah.
And so they attack what they fear and what they don't understand. And my hope is that whether it's my work or someone else's work, that they will eventually realize what they need to do.
Exactly. And now back to the program. Who do you think was backing or funding these clandestine programs?
Yeah, well, physically on this planet, it was the Illuminati, the 13 families, although it was not all 13 that were involved in Montauk. I would say with Montauk, we were talking more about Windsor family and Rothschild, specifically, although there were occasionally Romanov involved. But they used the alien technology, and there were many off-world / interdimensional civilizations involved as well.
So you're talking about the Illuminati. Now, with Illuminati, what is your I guess before we get into it about the Illuminati, because I was want to touch on the Illuminati just a little bit, Stewart, because many people have their own definition of the Illuminati. What is your definition? And I guess what is their intent on mankind? What is their agenda? What is the ultimate, I guess, end game scenario that they want to eventually strive humanity for or towards?
Yeah, I wrote about this in my Blue Blood book and the True World History book, if you're familiar with those. And these Illuminati are the 13 families who control the resources and political systems of the Earth. And they trace their ancestry back to the merger of the Magdalene lineage with the Khazars, both of whom entered into Europe and met in what is now the south of France. And in order to create peace, they intermarried, creating the first King Merovingi, and created the Merovingian, which was the first Illuminati family, and ultimately became 13. Their goal is the global domination, complete control of the human slave race that acquiesces to all that they wish to compete or complete on the Earth, and to create a galactic empire with the headquarters on the Earth. So that's their ultimate goal, which they are just very close to accomplishing.
Are they working alongside and being influenced by extraterrestrials, especially when it comes to important decision making?
Absolutely. Their origin from even before Sumer was alien, and I make a distinction, as I mentioned on many of my videos, between alien and extraterrestrial legally, especially in U.S. law. An alien is a physical being from this physical universe from another world. An extraterrestrial could be non-physical or borderline physical, non-physical, and not necessarily from this universe. So there's a distinction that we make. The original colonists on this planet were reptilian. They were alien. They came from the Draco Empire, Draco Star System. Their gods, the ones that they worship, are from the astral layers, which are non-physical. And so they're a combination of alien and extraterrestrial. So
I want to skip forward with our limited time with you this evening, Stewart. Let's skip towards the reptilians. And because, like I said pre-show, I want to cover as much as I can with this short amount of time that I have with you. But with the reptilians, what are the origins of the reptilians and or Dracos, and where do they come from? Did they also terraform this planet?
Yes, in fact, I've written about that. It goes back to the time of the Lemurian star system, where all humanity in this galaxy began, which was attacked by the reptilians. The refugees scattered out to many different star systems, including the one that we're in now, colonizing the planets Mars and a world that was called Maldek, which was between Mars and Jupiter. Make a long story short, the reptilians came, they destroyed Maldek, which became the asteroid belt. They sent in an ice comet, which ultimately became the planet Venus, pushed the Earth into the third position, made it colonizable, and they drove the moon into orbit around this planet. The moon is not a natural object, it's a vehicle. And from the moon, they colonized the Earth. And so technically...
What time frame are we looking at, Stewart? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's over 1 million years ago. And they were the ones who actually were the first ones here. and that's why they consider it to be their planet. And humans or mammalians came much later on.
I still want to stay on the reptilian topic just for a moment, but what time frame are we looking at between the reptilians colonizing Earth and the dawn of the human race?
Humans arrived on this planet approximately 350,000 years ago. And the reptilians were here about 700,000 years before that. So it was a dilemma.
Did we come into creation, like, I guess, are you a subscriber to Zechariah Sitchin's work, or do you have your own theory on this?
Well, Zechariah, and I have met him in the past. Unfortunately, whether intentionally or not, mistranslated the Sumerian documents.
A lot of people say that too.
And I tend to I know that's correct. However, we leave that up to history to decide whether it was intentional or not. And so some of it is correct, some not correct.
So who was it that, I guess, created us in their image and after their likeness?
Yeah, well, once the Draco, or the reptilians, who were androgynous, colonized the largest continent at the time, which is now known as Lemuria. And when the mammalians or humans came, they colonized the continent which we now call Atlantis. And there was war between them for millennia of time. And finally, in order to create peace, they decided to create a third race, which was the synthesis between the two. And that's why it says in the book of Genesis, let us create man in our image. It's always plural. There's never a reference in the Old Testament to a singular God. It's always a group or plural. All the ancient Hebrew words are plural. And so this is how humans were created. And the proof, you want to know the proof, look how humans gestate in the womb. For the first 6 or 7 weeks, the fetus is an androgynous reptilian being. And only afterwards are mammalian genetics open. And that is because the DNA is following the sequence in which it was applied. And the foundation was an androgynous reptilian, and then they added human genetics to that.
Give us a rundown, because you mentioned Atlantis and Lemuria. Give us a rundown of what race of beings lived on which continent at that time.
Yeah, Lemuria was occupied by androgynous reptilian beings, and there were 7 different species of reptilian, like a hierarchy, which ultimately became the basis of the Hindu caste system. And Atlantis was colonized by what I call pure Lyrian or human beings, which are very different than humans on the earth today. They were more tall, they were more light hair, light eyes, and much more etheric. Not that they were ghostly, but they had the ability to be more non-physical when needed. And of course, that all deteriorated during the wars and the synthesis when they created the third race. And what we see now on the planet is not the result just of that, but after the destruction of Lemuria and Atlantis through warfare, other civilizations came and manipulated the survivors into their own experiments. And so that's why we have different nationalities and different races, because there was a lot of manipulation subsequent to the first destruction.
So what time frame are we looking at between Lemuria and Atlantis with this war? And what was this battle fought over?
Well, initially, I always state reptilian and mammalian species should not occupy the same environment. They don't belong in the same cage, if you will. And so there's battles between them.
Too much ego.
Yes, and also there is innate hostility, because the Draco and the Lyrian, even before this world began, were at war, and that's why the Draco attacked Lyra. There was always a war between reptilian form and human or humanoid form. And this was that's why humans, even now, they have a genetic dislike for reptilian form. People don't like snakes, they don't like alligators, and so on. They see that and they get a problem. And so this is from ancient history. It's in the genetics. And so there was a battle. And the humans had, or the Atlanteans had, weapons that could distort the morphogenetic grid and the geothermal structure of the planet, and ultimately cause Lemuria to sink into what became the Pacific Ocean. And ultimately, they destroyed themselves as well.
And I'm glad you finished it with that, because what happened throughout history, Stewart, with to where Atlantis and Lemuria just seemed to vanish from ancient text or iconography?
Well, actually, it didn't vanish, because the records were stored in many places, and the most records were stored in the Library of Alexandria in northern Egypt, and the Vatican in the early centuries destroyed it because of the information that was.
What are they
there.
Afraid of, Stewart? What are they afraid of?
Truth. I don't mean to offend anyone who is of a Catholic religion, but the Vatican is quite a dangerous organization. And they have one of the worst mind control programs on the earth.
And because it makes you wonder, what in the hell are they afraid of? And because it's definitely Atlantis, Lemuria, they don't really talk about that in modern academia.
No, what the Vatican is afraid of is the truth about the Christ figure, because Christianity, as we know it today, is completely based on false history. And so they're afraid of losing their power should the truth come out. And that's what the Templars had over them. And ultimately were destroyed. Well, let's say they were not destroyed. Let's say they changed into something else.
And so I guess let's move forward just a little bit. At what point, I guess, throughout history, because you talk about inner Earth and hollow Earth also. So what time frame are we talking about that? Has the hollow Earth always been here? Or did the reptilians or another species kind of create and terraform this the hollow Earth?
No, they only terraformed the surface. The inner Earth was always this way. It's a part of planetary structure. Mars is also this way. I explained this in Blue Blood book about the science of how the such planets are formed by being molten material ejected from the sun, and how it spins and creates an inner and outer mantle, etc. It's a very long process, and people can read about that. But that is a natural form of such planets that are ejected from a star.
So where is the entrance to, because we know that Admiral Byrd traveled to the north and, is claimed that he found the entrance to hollow Earth, but also many theorize that there's another entrance in Antarctica, and that is one of the big, I guess, reasons why we seem to be so interested in Antarctica and the rest of the world.
Yeah, there's an opening at the North Pole, and there's an opening at the South Pole. The South Pole opening is smaller and more ice-covered than the North. And in the South, in Antarctica, Admiral Byrd found the Fourth Reich in 1946. And that's why United States and Canada and Great Britain started Project High Jump and attacked Antarctica in 1946 to 47. And they lost. And they were driven back, and 55 American military personnel were lost. And now we have a lot of military bases, especially on the Antarctic Peninsula. Britain, Ukraine, Argentina, Chile, etc. But during World War II, the Germans invaded Norway thus having access to the Norwegian territory, which the Germans called Neuschwabenland. And there they found undersea entrances to under the ice, open caverns where they built New Berlin, New Frankfurt, an entire civilization. And I'm not sure if this is still on internet, but there is a television program from about 1951 or 1952, a talk show that was filmed in New York City with Admiral Byrd. And they asked him about his venture a few years before that into Antarctica. And he said point blank that people should know that there is a country in the South Pole the size of the United States, which is very big and very dangerous and will be the next war. And we are seeing something like this happening now.
Exactly. And I've heard you mention on another program, Stewart, about these underground tunnels across the world going to Antarctica. What is that technically used for, and how did that become, or who created these tunnels?
They're very ancient. In fact, it was the Atlanteans who created a global underground tunnel system with very high-speed vehicles. You can call them trains or cars, whatever you want to call them. But they traveled extremely quickly. Since the 1930s, the U.S. government has discovered these tunnels and has built upon them and accessed their own and built their own. So they've been expanded, but there are tunnels that go from Africa and South America all the way to Antarctica. And they go all over the world, and they're used to this day, both by alien beings and by governments.
Is base 211 still there?
Yes, 211 we call it.
211?
Yes, or Neuschwabenland. There's many terms that we can call it, but yes, it's there.
So you're not a fan of or a subscriber to the the flat Earth theory?
The only people who believe in flat Earth are the ones with flat heads.
I had to ask you, Stewart.
Don't
hate me for it. I had to ask you.
No.
But anyways, let's get forward to we're kind of doing like just pretty much covering every aspect, every angle, and within this hour. So try to give everybody a good rundown of a base for your research. And of course, you go in much further detail in your books, your conferences, other interviews, that longer interviews. But let's get forward to the moon, Stewart. And you and others talk about the moon being an artificial construct. So when was the moon created, and when was it placed in orbit around the Earth?
Again, it was over 1 million years ago, but the moon and the rocks from the moon are older than the Earth. And the composition of the moon is not from the solar system. The atomic structure, the minerals, etc., is not found again anywhere in the solar system. It is from elsewhere. Also, the covering of the moon comes from inside. So it was like somebody dug holes and hollowed out the moon and put all the debris on the surface, you see? And of course, the moon does not spin. It only one side faces at all times, like an object, a vehicle parked in orbit. Everything else in the universe spins. Naturally, the moon doesn't spin. It just orbits like a vehicle. Mm-hmm. It was constructed specifically for this planet because it fits exactly in its location, distance from the Earth. It completely blocks out the sun when we have solar eclipse. This is not natural. Also, the Earth is not large enough to capture an object that big and sustain it around the planet in that orbit. So it's artificially kept in orbit. And also there are, if you look at the so-called craters on the moon, they're supposedly created by objects impacting meteors, etc., impacting on the moon's surface. However, the craters are flat. There's no debris. How could this be? It's a camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the surface of the moon with a powerful telescope, let's say on a full moon, and you look at anywhere, you will see movement. You will see lights. You will see these tubes going between openings on the surface. It's a vehicle.
I just interviewed John Lear a couple weeks ago, and he stated that there are, I think he said, I'm paraphrasing, it was something like 250 million people on the moon. I guess, give me your thoughts on, I guess, the moon population, and like, are these us part of the secret space program that were there on the moon, or are the inhabitants of the moon aliens or extraterrestrials? Which one are they?
All of the above. In fact, on the dark side of the moon, there is a Fourth Reich base that's hidden in one of the artificial craters, and is shaped like swastika. And this was actually photographed, I believe, in the 1980s. And when that was transmitted back and picked up or intercepted by amateur astronomers who were picking up the signals, and they put this out for the public, NASA apologized to the public for any offensive pictures of swastika, which was the result of a glitch in their camera.
Yeah, right. Really?
Yes, really. So that was one thing. Plus, there is a moon underground, yes. Mostly there are what we would call alien civilizations there. There are human civilizations as well. But the interesting thing is that any of the humans that are allowed from Earth to go there are only what we would call Aryan types, light hair, light eyes. No darker skinned people are allowed to be there.
So before, I guess, what was planet Earth like with our, I guess, consciousness, just the way of life before the moon? Did the moon kind of create this, because it is an artificial construct that was placed specifically by design where it is? Does that act like a barrier, almost like a prison planet?
Before the Draco came here, the Earth was covered only in water. It was a water planet, and even the atmosphere was very liquidy. There was no life on the surface. And it was only when the ice comet that the Draco sent into the solar system went into a rotational spin with the Earth that the water polarized, the ice caps formed, and land masses appeared above the ocean. And so before that, there was no life on the surface. And as I mentioned, it was the Draco that then drove the moon into orbit and colonized the largest continent at the time. So to answer your question, there was no human life or even precursor to human life on this planet before that event.
So I've heard you say on other programs before that you went to Antarctica, back to Antarctica.
Did?
Now, what was that? Was that just I don't know, like, what was the cause? Was it for your own research and your own journey, or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I went on a German ship, interestingly enough. And I visited many bases. I visited Argentinian, Chilean, UK, a Ukrainian base at the time. And what I found interesting was at the British base, there was a plaque that stated that the base had been built to monitor the enemy. That's all it said. So I was curious to know, who was the enemy in Antarctica? Were there perhaps terrorist penguins, or perhaps vicious seals and walruses that were dangerous? But of course nobody would answer that question because I knew what the answer was. And I may tell you that went into an active volcano because off the coast of Antarctica is called Deception Island. Deception Island is an active volcano, but you can sail into the cone because last eruption, part of it collapsed and filled with water. And while we were circling around in the active water, which probably was a very stupid thing to do in an active volcano, that
Just a little
there
bit.
were there were UFOs in the sky that we photographed that were watching.
But you only
Right
live
in
once, Stuart. You only live once, so
Oh,
I'd
many
probably do
times.
it.
Yeah, I've
But
done many stupid things, I suppose.
that is just like my grandfather told me. That is how you develop wisdom, also by
Hmm.
living and learning.
Yes,
So
amongst other things that you might develop.
yeah. But anyways, let's move forward just a little bit. Kind of making this little journey for the audience. We
Mhm.
started from kind of the beginning in the history, but let's move forward to you talk about the Kuiper Belt in your conferences, and now are these extraterrestrials or aliens? I got to say that. Are they living or hiding within the Kuiper Belt? And if so, are they living with an environment, or how could they be living within an environment? Because I hear the Kuiper Belt is pretty harsh. Is that correct?
No, they're not living on the natural objects. They're living in vehicles, and so
But
they have their
that's what I meant.
yeah, and they have completely surrounded the solar system, and so there's basically a quarantine. However, the government has technology that enables uh, wormhole and vortex travel. So it doesn't matter. They can go non-physically past this. However, physically, the solar system is quarantined by these beings. And they come from civilizations, both alien and extraterrestrial, both from this universe and not from this universe. And what people need to understand is all stars are exit portals for other dimensions, and black holes are entrance portals to other dimensions. Some can also be wormholes. A wormhole is a shortcut within the same physical reality. A vortex is between different realities.
Hmm.
So we need to understand that these are two different things. And so that's how they travel here.
So do we have a vortex near Earth, and is that a means of interstellar travel of I guess is that a means for us, I guess, whoever you want to call them, Illuminati or the aliens here on Earth, is that a means for them to interstellar travel through other galaxies or other
It's
dimensions?
one. It's one of the
Well,
ways,
what
but
about dimensions? Can they travel to other
yeah, yeah,
dimensions too?
yeah. And that's a technology that we accessed at Montauk Project because it was known from alien technology that was either given or confiscated that no point in time and space is different. In other words, they're all unique. No 2 points are the same. And so, if you have a target location and you know the frequency of that location, and you take your vehicle and you match that vehicle with the same frequency as the target location, there's an instantaneous travel within seconds because no 2 points with the same frequency can be separate. You understand? So,
Mm.
literally, you can travel billions of light years in a split second that way. You see? So, that's
Mm.
one method. And going through the black holes and the stars is another method, depending on the necessity and what they're trying to do. So, it's like, do you take a train or a plane or a car? It's whatever is necessary at the moment.
What about stargates? Do we
It's
have
the
any?
same.
It's
That's what
the same thing. Okay.
that's what a Stargate is. It matches the frequency of the destination to the person, place, or thing that's being transmitted. So
So
there's an instant connection.
so I guess before, where does this I guess the cosmic, is there a cosmic war on between different races out there in the galaxy or just in the universe? Is there, maybe that's getting too big of a picture, but is there a cosmic
No,
war? Because it seems like, especially whenever many researchers talk about this, Joseph Farrell talks about it also. But now, was there a cosmic war in the ancient past, and is there still a secret war that's going on that is going on behind the scenes?
I can tell you, Michael, that there is war constantly in this galaxy, other galaxies, other realities, constant war. It makes There's so much war out there in space that it makes the Earth look like the Garden of Eden. Yes. And in fact, that's the natural state of many civilizations. They have a constant battle. And on this planet, quite frankly, this Earth is considered to be like the Syria of the galaxy. You know,
Hmm.
it's a war zone, and humans are considered dangerous, hostile, and aggressive, and also insignificant. So people have to understand that there are no space brothers. There's no one coming to upgrade your DNA. There's no, angels coming to take you to see Jesus. It's not like that. They have an agenda, every single group, and there are many, many groups.
Which which of these groups are more in league with many names, the Illuminati, the Cabal? Which ones are they here on Earth working with of, I guess, more? Is it the reptilians?
Well, good question, because the Illuminati have decided since approximately before World War II that they were going to become the new galactic empire and replace the reptilians. So there are factions of reptilians that work with the government and factions that do not. There are factions within factions. It's very, very complicated. You know, it's like saying, the U.S. government is cohesive. It is not. There's many political parties. There's many factions within the parties, and they all battle against one another. It's extremely complicated situation.
Are we past due for a staged alien invasion
I believe
by the
it's already
powers that should be?
begun. They are already telling you that there are aliens out there. They told you that there's 300 million Earth-like planets just in this galaxy. They told you that we will probably see aliens within 20 years, and so on and so on. The Vatican has already told people that aliens exist and that they are our brothers in Christ. So when the Vatican is saying this, it means they're preparing you for something coming soon.
Exactly. And does that lead towards the Project Bluebeam? Do you think they'll use that, or
That's been used since 1962.
well, what other, I guess, what other weapons at their arsenal could they use?
I will tell you, Michael, that the government has weapons that would seem like magic to the population. They can do anything. They have all alien technology that they've either confiscated, purchased, or were given over the many decades. And so the government has high technology that is not available to the public.
So back in 1952, July 12th of 1952, what were the UFOs sighted over Washington, D.C.? Were they ours or
No, those were alien. They were from the Rigel Star System
what was their intent and purpose?
to scare the government into acquiescing to their demands.
Is that because that's right around the same time with Eisenhower meeting with
That was in 1954.
and was that part of the same group that met with Eisenhower?
Correct.
So
That's correct.
so explain a little bit more about that meeting between Eisenhower and the aliens.
Well, first, let me just say something, which I need to say is I am friends with Laura Eisenhower, and she insists that her great grandfather did not do those things. And he did not make agreements with these groups to sell out human beings. So I have to say that in respect to her. However,
That aside,
somebody allowed them to abduct human beings and to, in exchange for technology.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more than one group. That particular group in 1954 were the Reptilians. There were other beings from other star systems, Sirius A, there were beings from Tau Ceti, there were beings from Procyon, beings from Andromeda Galaxy, and so on over the years. Many, many, many. And in fact, recently, I would say recently, meaning the last 7, 8 years, there's even a group from Polaris star system, which has a base in Midway Islands near Hawaii, and so on. In the 1967 to 68, there were massive abductions in the Gulf area, especially not Louisiana, but Alabama, Georgia, Florida, etc. And so government was very interested in this, and they arranged through a contactee a meeting with a representative of this alien group. And this was done at an Air Force base near Pensacola, Florida. And so during this meeting, it was around 1968, the being told the general of the U.S. government, the Army, that he represented a group called the Network, that they were 17,000 worlds in unification, extending from Milky Way to Andromeda Galaxy, and that their leaders were not physical. They were from alternate realities. And the reason they were interested in the Earth was because the Earth fell into their territory, and that human beings were the invaders. And so the general said, well, since we are in your territory, then you will protect the Earth. And the being said, yes, we will protect the Earth, but you may not be here. That's how it ended, see? And so that's when the government also started to make deals with other groups, not so nice, who were willing to do things in exchange for nefarious purposes.
So let's go back to 1979. Explain a little bit on the booklet that the U.S. Air Force gave to the Special Forces in 1979, naming and showing different aliens visiting Earth, and also
70 different ones.
Also, was it in the late 90s also?
Yes, and that was, I think, about 117 different ones at that time. All considered hostile, all to be fired upon sight.
It makes you wonder why more of these people don't come forward and disclose this information, because
they are threatened with death and the death of their families. That's why.
I guess the death of the family would bother me more, because I've heard of that they won't even go after you. They'll go after your families to make you suffer. You know, is what I've been told. Yes.
And then they will come after you.
But so I guess with 2018 coming, Stewart, you know, we're getting towards the end of this show. So tell me your predictions for 2018. What's going to be taking place? What's going to happen in the foreseeable future?
Good question.
What does your gut tell you?
I tell you what I know.
Okay.
You know, first of all, there will be a significant change in the leadership of the United States. I would just say that. There will be an increased staged alien invasion, which in my opinion has already begun. And there will be significant global catastrophes, which will be called natural disasters, which are really artificially enhanced natural disasters. Okay. You are in Louisiana.
Yes.
The southern part of Louisiana is slipping into the Gulf and disappearing. So that is why they're not rebuilding most of Louisiana from Katrina all those years ago, because they know it's going to be sunk. I can say the same for Florida, south of a line from Tampa to Orlando to Daytona. If you draw a line, everything south of there, ocean. North, more swamp. California, any moment, gigantic disaster. Nobody will help them. I just did a podcast today, and hopefully you and your viewers will see this. The United States, North America, is being crunched from the West Coast by the subduction zone of the Pacific Plate, and on the East Coast by the rift in the North Atlantic Ridge, which is pushing west. So being crunched. And that is putting pressure on what is called the North American Creton, which is an ancient continental boundary, which has been covered up, which is now being moved. The New Madrid Fault Line is part of that. And this is also starting to move. So we are not going into global warming. This is a lie. We are also going into an ice age. It's interesting to me, for example, last few days they showed this water coming out of a little tiny hole in a glacier in Greenland. And then they move the camera back, and so then you can't even see it because it's actually like a trickle, but they make it look like it's something more. And of course, that was filmed in July when it's warmer, But I was in Greenland a couple of years ago in July, and the snow was over my head. So, no, there's no global warming. Greenland is not melting at all. And in fact, the global temperatures have dropped since the late 1980s. So what you hear on the news, I wouldn't believe a word of it.
Do we have a optimistic future, or do you think the powers that shouldn't be, or the aliens, whoever is in league with each other here on Earth, do they have a doom and gloom type end game for humanity? And
yes.
So explain a little bit on this, Stewart, because this will be where we leave off right here.
Well, so I guess I'm supposed to leave off with something positive. And so I will say, to answer your question initially, yes, many of the groups, and they all have different agendas. It's not like they have one. But none of them are in the human best interest. And so I tell people, if you remove the negative victimization mind pattern and the programming that's been imposed on you, and you regain your full mind and connection to your oversoul and God mind within, then they can have no power over you. Then you can change everything. So really, it's not up to a savior. It's not up to some wonderful space brother. It's up to each one of us as individuals connected to the Creator to change the way we think and to project that out and change the events of the world. So everyone is responsible for themselves and collectively.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Stewart. Man, I try to cover as much as I could within this time frame that we have. I try to keep these video interviews quick, short, and to the point compared to other programs. Just get the meat and potatoes out there. And if they want to get more information, they can read your books, True World History, Blue Blood, True Blood. Go to your website and become a member at expansions.com. And so give the audience some more info on whatever you have coming out soon. You explained about the conference and stuff in January, but do you have anything else? And how can people subscribe to your website and become a member?
Go to expansions.com, and all the information is there. You can also go to our Facebook web pages, and we have 5 of them that you can like us on Facebook, etc. Everything is posted there as well. I mentioned we have this big conference in Nevis involving the Templars at the end of December. January is our class. In February, I will be filming a movie in a studio in New York about myself, actually. And I was also invited to the Dominican Republic by the General of the Army, and by the Minister of Health to teach the soldiers and the medical people there. I was also invited back to Istanbul to do live television shows and seminars there as well, and even to Ecuador. That's all just February and early March. Then Mexico City in March. We also have been invited by Raul Castro and his daughter Muriel Castro to come to Havana to teach there and also do investitures there. So it's a very exciting year ahead. We will also be going back to Italy to do time with the Waldensians in the Alps. I also have an investiture in Scotland at Roslin Chapel, which will be quite fascinating, hasn't been done in centuries. So all of this will be on the website, and I mentioned to you earlier that I have a new show coming in January. Will premiere January 21 with Alfred Weber and Magnus Olsen, who's the director of Mind Tech, where we will be doing shows on mind control, programming, deprogramming, etc. For the global audience, which will be syndicated. I will say that in January, the January class, there will be a special guest, a very famous one from the Montauk Project, who will be here for the week. And there will also be an Australian chiropractor who will be giving treatments on a bed that he created, which I have tested myself, and it will remove pain from your body completely, realign your spine and your pineal gland. Amazing. I recommend you all come here in January.
Well, Stewart, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to have to have you on in the future to discuss more in-depth things, maybe just focus on a particular subject, instead of just kind of cramming all this information. But like I said, everybody can go to your website, go to your YouTube channel, get your books, and everything will be in the description below for everybody to search, explore, expand their knowledge. And Stewart, thank you very much. I salute you for your service for humanity, and thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate inviting.
And you can subscribe. All the new people that's coming on for the first time, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, keep truthing and have a good one.